Welcome to the How to Play Adeptus Titanicus series. In today's installment, we'll take a look at the strategy phase and orders. The strategy phase is broken down into 3 steps. They're determine first player, enact stratagems, and issue orders. Determining first player for turn 1 in the game is actually done a little differently than the rest of the turns. To figure this out, you'd actually have to look at the deployment method that you used. And in this game, there's 4 types of deployment. Each of them outline a different condition for which player gets which die on this roll-off, and it's found in the paragraph beside them. Usually these will outline a circumstance where one player is given a d6 and the other player is given a d10 for the roll-off. Regardless of what the circumstance is for which player gets which, the winner gets to decide whether they'll be first player or their opponent will be first player and take the initiative. Whichever player's decided to be player 1 and has the initiative, they physically would take the Opus Titanica marker, or the Titanicus T, and move it to their side of the board to indicate that they are first player. Now, in turn 2 on, so turns 2 through 6, this is done pretty similar but a little different. In this case, both players are given a d10 and they roll off. The player with the higher number again would decide whether they're going to be player 1 or give it to their opponent. And the player that's given first player of the initiative would again take the Titanicus T to their side of the board to indicate they have initiative and are the first to activate a unit. After determining first player, you can now use the stratagems that you purchased in the pre-game section based on the game level, and you would just start with the first player enacting one of their stratagems, move to the second player, and alternate back and forth until you've both done everything you want to do. It's worth noting that if you do have stratagems, you don't have to play them in this step. You can actually pick and choose the turn you decide to use them. And because this is alternate activation based, say you didn't want to play one of your stratagems, or you didn't want to do any, then your opponent would be able to do all of the stratagems they wanted to after you've made that decision. There's actually several types of stratagems in Titanicus, and they all do kind of different things. The first one is tricks and tactics. These ones let you change the gameplay and do some sort of unexpected effect on your opponent. Ranged support is an offensive stratagem that lets you call in some sort of attack, whether that's an artillery strike or an orbital strike that will put some shots on your enemy's titans. Tertiary objectives. These objectives or stratagems are really good if you get a bad draw on missions to pick from. If you don't think you can accomplish them, your tertiary objectives are worth looking at because they'll actually give you a good way of getting some points on the board that you otherwise might not have been able to. The battlefield assets. These are physical markers you put on the board. You would have already deployed them in the deployment phase, but they typically give you a good defensive ability or a decent offensive ability and extra shots. You actually can have these destroyed though. They can be destroyed by titans walking on them or your enemies shooting at them. So it can be a bit of a point investment, but sometimes worth it. I've actually built lists around battlefield assets to leverage shooting. And the last one's Legio specific. These are specific stratagems you'd find in the supplements next to whatever legion you've decided to build your list around, and they often show off a lot of the cool characteristics and interesting ways your specific legion will play on the tabletop. The last step of the strategy phase is issuing orders. This is, like everything in Titanicus, done through alternate activations. So you would, as first player, activate one of your titans and issue an order. Then your opponent would do one of their titans, and you just keep switching back and forth until you do all of the orders you want to do. Once one of you runs out of activations or no longer wants to keep issuing orders, it just defaults to the other player to continue doing all of their orders in a row. Orders themselves tend to be quite a bit of a double-edged sword. They let you do a certain action in a certain phase extremely well, but it's usually at a very limiting cost. Like, it'll let you shoot extra weapons at the cost of moving, which makes them a very situational thing and can kind of be tricky to fully utilize. The beauty of this game is the more you play, you start to learn how to spot the situations where a specific order will be really handy, and really learn to employ them in a pretty smart, strategic way. Sometimes, again, the best course of action is not issuing orders at all. When it's your turn to activate a Titan and actually issue it orders, you have to do something called a command check per Titan and per order. And how you do this is you would take a D10 die and roll it. Compare the number that you've rolled to that Titan's command terminal, specifically its command value. If the number you've rolled is the same or higher than that number on the terminal, then the command check is passed and the Titan gains that order. You would let your opponent issue an order to one of their Titans, return back to your force and do the same. But if you fail this command check, then your Titan can't be issued any orders that turn, and unless you have some way of changing this, like a maniple trait or a battlefield asset that allows you to continue, you actually can't issue orders to the rest of your battle group. So once you fail a check, you've actually lost your ability to issue orders to the rest of your battle group, typically speaking. When it comes to orders, you've actually got your choice of 6 orders that you can issue to a Titan. I'll just briefly go over what's kind of involved in each of them and a few situations where you might want to use them. Emergency repairs lets you immediately do a repair order for every servitor you have in the strategy phase instead of the damage control phase, and it gives you a bonus of +1 to each of those die results for repairs. But this comes at a cost of either moving or shooting. You can't do both, you'd have to do one or the other. Typical situations where you would want to use this is if you've got a severely damaged Titan and you need to get some of its systems back online. Split fire occurs in the combat phase, and it lets you choose a different target for each one of your weapons. The cost of this is you can't make any turns, and your Titan's restricted to only moving in its forward arc without changing its facing. Where this is handy is if you have multiple targets in front of you and you want to play to what your weapons are best at. Like if one target is shielded and another target isn't, you could split fire your missiles onto the shielded target and your heavy weapons onto the ones without shields for best effect. Shutdown orders occur in the strategy phase, and after you pass your command check, the Titan essentially powers down all of its systems. If it has active void shields, they collapse immediately. There's no need to do reactor checks, and your Titan won't be able to move or shoot. The benefit of this is at the start of every damage control phase, your Titan's reactor track automatically goes down 2 positions before you make your repair rolls. Something that is interesting about this order is you can't actually remove this order in the end phase. You have to do a sort of die roll to relight your reactor, and that occurs in the strategy phase of the next turn. You won't actually be able to roll to relight your reactor if your reactor track is in the orange or red location. To do this though, you would roll a d6, and on a 5+, you would get your reactor back online, and the order is removed. But if your reactor track is in the first position, the farthest left position on the rail, then you actually get a +2 to this die roll to relight your reactor. You would mainly want to use this if you have a Titan that's severely overheating and about to essentially make itself explode. Whether you pass your relight roll or not in the strategy phase, your Titan actually can't be issued any order that strategy phase. You'll have to wait for the next game turn to try issuing something else if you want to. Charge orders are great for moving in for the kill. They occur in the movement phase, and your Titan's given 1 turn, but once it starts moving, it has to keep moving in a straight line within its front arc towards an enemy Titan without changing its facing. When you get within base-to-base contact, you can immediately make either a smash attack or attack with a melee weapon, and your Titan gets a bonus of 1 die for every full 3 inches it moved. This is great for getting within opponents' shields and not having to worry about shield saves, and just closing the distance and really putting some damage on Titans. First Fire is a very popular early game order to issue. It occurs in the movement phase, and it allows you to shoot one of your Titan's weapons at the cost of not being able to move or turn. This order is really good for dropping shields early in the game, or double tapping unshielded targets. Another handy benefit is it also lets you get some shots off on a target that may be about to run out of your Titan's line of sight or arcs. Another popular early game order is Full Stride. This one's kind of the opposite of First Fire. It occurs in the combat phase, and rather than shooting your Titan's weapons, it's allowed to make an additional move up to its full distance within its front arc. This order is great for getting your Titans into the midfield early in the game, or zipping your Titan out of line of sight from an enemy Titan that may be about to shoot at it. I find it really handy for missions like Vital Cargo and Retrieval, and it's really good to throw on Warhounds. And those were the 3 steps of the strategy phase, as well as all the orders you have available. Next topic, movement. That's everything for today's topic. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, or if you're interested in more Titanicus content and how to play, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you on the next one.